I want to
So
go on from discussing the story because it was exciting. It was definitely, I don't know if you would agree with me, a family film, but with some adult elements for sure. I mean, definitely the director's cut.
but the good thing about the adult elements is a lot of them are implied and they're not
Yes,
actually said.
they're pretty deeply implied. I think it's good in terms of that. Again, my first time watching this film, but I really want to kind of segue into how the music really tied into making that movie what it was. The scary parts, the exciting parts, the adventurous parts.
Yeah, you can say what you want to about Danny Elfman and some of his score sounds. He's got the Batman theme, he's got the Beetlejuice theme. There's probably like one other movie, and then like he repeats on those. But when you need somebody to give you both a whimsical type sound, but also like those menacing right before some kind of major scare happens, he's one of the best.
Oh yeah,
Like he just is.
he can change the temperature of the room. I swear to God. Just with music alone. And it almost made this like a scary Disney film, but it also wasn't too dark. Like the music wasn't too dark. Usually with Danny Elfman, it does get that way. I didn't get that, but I think the music just fit every tune he made. It just fit with the film, no matter what the scene was.
And what he actually did was he actually recorded all his stuff because this was filmed in New Zealand. I mean, because this was the reason that, Peter Jackson wanted, he wanted this movie was because he agreed, he got him to agree to film it in New Zealand so he wouldn't have to leave and go to Los Angeles because he didn't want to, work there at the time.
Yeah.
And so Danny Elfman recorded all of his stuff in Los Angeles and then gave all the tapes. He was nice enough and gave all the tapes to Peter Jackson and entrusted him to mix them in as he needed them. He said, he didn't even tell him how to do it. He was just like, you do what you think is best for the movie, taking what I've given you. And that's how they work.
So he didn't even see the scenes when he made this music?
No, he was given the general storyboards and he made them up on the storyboards. The movie was not even close to being ready by the time he did this.
Shit, that dude's a fucking genius.
He is.
And then Peter Jackson had to work that around the scenes, even though it was like, okay, well, this is probably for this is for that, but wow.
Yeah, he gave him ideas of where he wanted the scenes at, but he said you cut it up, mix it however you need to make the scene work the best. And and that shows how much he trusted him, because a lot of composers would have been like, this is how I intended this, I don't want you to mess with it. But he trusted Peter Jackson enough to say, what's going to be best for the movie. You take what I've given you and you mix it what you need done. So I think that's pretty impressive that he had that trust in Peter Jackson to do that.
Yeah. God damn, dude.
And Peter Jackson said there was only one scene in the movie, and I can't remember what it is now. I wished I could, that the music just didn't fit the scene. He said everything else was perfect. He said whenever he went to put it in there, he said it's exactly what he needed. He said there was just one scene that what Danny recorded didn't exactly fit the scene. And like I said, I can't remember. It had something to do with Patricia and I think the discovery of the blade or something. But anyways, like if Frank Bannister's, the one that's got the FB on it, the blade that stole, and I think that was the scene, and they said everything else fit perfect, and that's what they went with. And they even showed on the special features, they showed what the scene was like with just the special or the sound effects, what it sounded like with just the music, and then what it sounded like combined together. And of course, it takes the sound effects too to make the movie, but I mean that movie nowhere near the impact without Danny Elfman's score, like not even a glimpse of it.
Yeah. You know what I just thought of as you're talking about the scene about where she finds the FB blade is that the mom was so the mom did know that Patricia was psycho. Was she hiding the blade from her so she wouldn't kill again, or was she just trying to cover up?
I think she was hiding it from her so she wouldn't kill again. She thought that, I mean, just like you get a lot of these parents out there, I mean, of like criminals. I mean, all they see is the baby they raised. They don't see the adult that came out of it. So that's what she was still she even says a line like that in the movie. I think it's like, she's still an innocent girl or something. She's saying that at the beginning of the movie, I think, like screaming that as, Johnny quote unquote death is attacking, quote unquote, because
Yeah.
they're not really their foreplay. Patricia, and then like she says something to that. So in her mind, Patricia was the innocent who was taken in by Johnny. It was all Johnny. She wasn't psycho herself. It was Johnny's fault. That's how she always in her mind kind of reconciled that. Or the mother, I mean.
Oh my God. Back real quick, just to touch on the music again. If indeed Peter Jackson says, okay, well he did, but there was a scene that he's like, this probably didn't sound the best. I didn't notice it, and I don't know if you did until you saw his, extras or whatever.
I didn't notice it at all. I mean, it's the one thing about a Danny Elfman score is that it's like, I feel like it's always there. Like, I mean, it's brought to the forefront when it needs to be, but it's always in the background somewhere. Like there's not a lot of silence in the movies. I mean, it's like whenever, we was talking about The Devil's Backbone, there's that one scene that Guillermo said, I wanted it completely silent whenever they're attacking, the bad guy in the movie, so that it doesn't that was his way of saying, I'm not going to sway it one way or the other if you're supposed to be rooting for or against this guy. And like, I feel like with Danny Elfman's score, there's always something there, like anytime he's got a score, it's just a little bit, even if it's a soft movement that you can barely hear.
Yeah, when we get into discussing The Entity too, and we talk about the music, I'm going to bring up how the times where you think there's silence, but there actually isn't. It's just something I noticed, and so when we get to there, I'll tell you, but that's definitely something I'm going to want to touch on. Music was amazing in this film. Again, I think it's what turns this film from, don't let your kids watch this to, hey, your kids could watch this. You guys, you I don't know, something. It changed, like I said, it lightens the mood of that movie without taking away the scares.
I mean, it's not to downplay Danny Elfman because I love the score. It's one of the few scores that I will actually sit down and listen to, Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
It's got that whimsical, playful score to it that, I mean, even if the stuff you're seeing on the screen would actually scare you if you had like a sharp harpsichord going off, or as we'll get into The Entity, that specific type of music. Whereas in a Danny Elfman film, it's like it's almost like, okay, what you're seeing is scary, to an extent, but remember, this is a playful movie. It's like he's kind of reminding you, it's like it's okay,
Yeah.
We've already discussed the visuals as far as it looks. I mean, like I said, a lot of it stands up. The only thing I would say that doesn't stand up is the Grim Reaper, and they did what they could back in the day. I mean, you just got to accept it and move on. I mean,
look, I'm always going to fall back on this, but this was 1996. And do you remember what John Constantine tried to pull off in 2005?
What do you remember what they tried to accomplish in the House on Haunted Hill with the, Ghost Evelyn or whatever her name is, as she's like, dissolving into that horrible, like, I would give at least that the Reaper in this looked better than that.
Yes.
So
for sure. But the Reaper in this was not near as scary as Ghostface, which came out a few months later in Scream.
Well, that's true.
Same concept.
And we'll be discussing him next year, so tune in for that, folks.
Yes. Next season, slasher season.
The acting of this movie, we've discussed a little bit, but there's some things I want to point out. Something you don't realize about John Astin, who played the judge, is that all of his acting is in his eyes. And I mean, it really is, because they even mentioned that he is covered in so many prosthetics that you're not seeing his real face. He can, if he makes any movements, you can see a little bit of it, but it's very muted. So like, even if he goes like way out there, like it barely registers because his face is so done up. But you look at his eyes, those big expressive eyes that Gomez Addams had, and he if he's happy, if he's upset, it's all in his eyes.
It's the eyes and the voice, honestly.
Well, that too. I mean, he modulates his voice, but I mean, especially if you look at the makeup, like without the ghost effect, like they've got in the special features, just those huge, eyes he's got, like he's very expressive. And that's exactly the reason Peter Jackson wanted him in the movie for that part. He said, we've got to have an actor who's got who's got eyes that can sell everything we're needing to sell. And they looked and he's like, it's John Astin. That's who we're getting. And he did it, we're talking about Michael J. Fox. I mean, Michael J. Fox is a Class A actor to me. I mean, the guy's good. I mean, really good.
Yeah.
He sells the drama. He's got comedy timings. He can, kind of time that stuff. I mean, and then I thought Trini held her own in this. I mean, I wasn't super aware of her, but she did very well. And then, I mean, Jake Busey's hamming it up, but that's what the part needed. So I'll give him credit for the acting that he did.
He kind of played himself.
He played his dad. Let's be honest.
That's true. Okay, now specifically about Jake Busey, and granted they had a younger version of Patricia. I think they did an amazing job of holding up his age, if you will, because she was 14 or 15, so she was a teenager, young teenager, and he's probably early 20s, maybe late teens, like early adulthood. And everything,
Mm-hmm.
I get it. It fucking happens, okay, guys? Whatever. We know that there's a weird age thing going on. And I know he's the same person, but I think in terms of how they combed his hair to make him look like he was from that time era and kept that going, and then it worked obviously a lot better with older Patricia, who's now of age,
Oh, yeah, of course. And then, I mean, giving Dee Wallace her credit, I mean, she played the psychopath perfectly, for the scene. But she's the kind of actress that, I mean, you see why Rob Zombie, likes her as like an actress, because Rob Zombie likes over, I mean, he likes over the top, and she does that. So, not that that's bad. I mean, the part, it worked in this movie, but she's good at doing over the top. She's also good. I mean, if you saw her past films, she was good playing like more subdued characters back in her early days, but like she just got, I mean, more and more people, there's like, we want Dee Wallace, we want you to act as crazy, as out there as you can. And she's like, whatever, you're paying me a paycheck, I'll do what you need,
Yeah, get it, girl. I don't know. I think it all worked really well, and the direction, clearly a great director, because, I mean, great actors, I get it, but seriously, when you mix the two together, you really do get very close to perfection, so.
And then give credit to the other two guys, Cyrus and Stewart. I mean, they played their comedy parts extremely well. We'll get into the trivia here in a second. You'll see why I say that, because they actually wrote their characters.
Oh, my God.
Legit. So you want to just go into the trivia while we're at it?
Yeah, let's roll into the trivia.
So Charles Starkweather, the real-life serial killer referenced in the movie, killed 11 people and 2 dogs.
What?
Rut-row,
Fuck him.
During a nearly 2-month killing spree. This is a tangent, but Charles Starkweather is the boogeyman to Stephen King. Every Stephen King, killer type character is based on Charles Starkweather.
God damn.
That's a little bit trivia for you. It happened when he was a kid. He read about it in the newspapers, and it scarred him for life. And that's why we've got Stephen King's It and some other, and all the other stuff that he did. So I guess Starkweather's kind of the inspiration for our modern day, nightmares. So anyways, his 14-year-old girlfriend, Carol Fugate, accompanied him and anticipated most of his killings. He was caught, tried, and convicted and executed by electric chair, which, if you'll notice, and that's one good thing I love about the design of the character in this, if you look at the top of Johnny Bartlett's head, you can see where the cap that they put on the electrical chair fried and killed him.
I didn't even think about that. No, I did not notice.
Yeah, it's like this big black, like burn on the top of his head where they put the cap down on him. So anyways, in a 17-month span, he was caught, tried, convicted, and executed. Fugate was sentenced to life in prison, but was paroled after serving 17 years. So obviously, Starkweather and Carol were the inspiration for Patricia and Johnny. Johnny Bartlett is actually named after Velda and Marion Bartlett, the second and third victim of Charles Starkweather, who murdered, the 11 people in Nebraska and Wyoming. And Carol, whose precise role in the killings is not known. The story has been dramatized in Badlands, a 1973 film, and other movies. In this film, Johnny named Starkweather as his role model because, he's always mentioning, he asked Patricia, how many did Starkweather have? And that's he's trying to beat the record, basically.
That's pretty cool. I mean, Psycho, but
here's I'm gonna give credit to this. Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson came up with this script, at least the basic form of it. I mean, they added all this stuff in later. While they were out walking together, I mean, they just spending time as a couple. They were going to walk to like one of the local stores, and I think this is so cool as a couple. They were just like, "Hey, let's brainstorm our next movie," because they were like knee deep in Heavenly Creatures at that time, and they wanted a break. So they were just like, "Let's do something fantastical. What can we do?" And they just came up with an idea for this on the way to get some groceries one day. That's
what the fuck?
I admire that kind of creativity.
Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
Oh my god.
So the weird thing is that Starkweather and the victims, the two Bartlett victims, are buried together in the same cemetery in Lincoln, Nebraska. That'd be kind of shitty, be buried next to your killer, but it is what it is, or not next to them, but at least around them. The first name of Patricia Bradley, Dee Wallace's character, provides a hint at her criminal past, revealed later in the film. She is named after Patty Hearst, a girl who was taken hostage by an urban guerrilla group, then brainwashed into sympathizing with her kidnappers and helping them rob banks. So, like, that's why she's named Patricia, is after Patricia Hearst or Patty Hearst.
Yes, of the Hearst family, Hearst Castle, also out here in Hearst Publishing, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she did come from like a well-to-do family.
Oh, very wealthy, and it is very, very, very much discussed that she was not a victim, that she was indeed a very willing the spirit was willing in her, and that she was able to get off so easy, one, because she's a billionaire's daughter at the time, two, I mean, how easy is it to, especially as a woman back when she was, when she was indicted on this, to just be like, yeah, I didn't want to do any of that. They forced me, and I was so confused.
Oh, yeah,
And they said that a lot of women got away with a lot of crimes doing that back in the day. So don't tell me.
There's so many female killers who got away with, or murderers, robbers, whatever, that got away with it because either the guys couldn't believe that they would do that because they're the sensitive, sex or whatever you want to say, like it was a kind of a sexism that protected women when they, and it was really bad.
So yes, Patty Hearst was able to get off very, very easily, and nobody really knows the full true story, honestly.
That's craziness. I mean, I've heard some things about that, about that story. I think Stephen King maybe worked her into one of his stories too, to be honest with you. I remember Everything's Eventual or something like that she was in. The Russian cannibal creep that's referred to by Bartlett, because there's a scene between him and Patricia where he's like 40, that beats that Russian cannibal creep or something, is actually Andrei Chikatilo, who is a Ukrainian.
Oh, my God.
You probably know way more about him, but that's what that's referencing.
You have to know what Chikatilo is from.
I know what it's from. I'm letting you take the reins on this.
Time Suck.
Yeah, you listen to Time Suck way more than I do, because I know that they bring Chikatilo up all the time.
All the time. What is big deal? He's got a shame cock, by the way. Apparently he can't get it up, so he is not doing any ghost fucking, as far as we are aware. And I think that's what caused him to murder, which, I mean, I hear that's a legit thing. A lot of these serial killers from back in the day, a lot of them had issues with their thingies, and which is very unscientific for me to pronounce it that way, but whatever. I said what I said, and it drives them crazy, and there's got to be some scientific explanation behind that.
Well, a lot of them also have family issues that lead that, but that all leads into that what you're talking about too.
Oh,
it's like a whole thing. I mean, but I just thought that was kind of cool that they had another reference to another serial killer, in the movie that,
and not one that's super well known. I mean, he is, but not really. He's definitely not popular in the circuit, Oh
yeah. He's not one of the big name ones. I mean, other than Time Suck, I wouldn't have known who that was.
100%.
The film was not released to theaters in Tasmania, where devils are at, I've been told. in Australia because they did have like a real life killing there called the Port Arthur Massacre that mirrored the film's content, and it happened not long before the film's release. So they was like, no, we're not going to, So it's kind of crazy that stuff like that happened after they made this movie.
I bet you that made it, for some of the locals, that might have made it more enticing to want to see it.
It could have, but then you have like the censor board's always assuming that it's going to play bad or whatever. I mean, hell, they pulled Donnie Darko back from its original release right after 9/11 because they thought that somehow that seeing the scene in the movie where he shoots Frank the Bunny would like somehow trigger people during that time. And I'm just like, that's not even remotely related to anything, that happened at 9/11. So whatever, but they do what they do, In the special features making of documentary, both Peter Jackson and actor Jim Fife shared their own experiences with the supernatural. Fife, being the one who played Stewart, shared a story where he was with his daughter, who was then a toddler, and they were down in the basement of this apartment building, the real old one, and that's where the laundromat was at. And they were, he was down there doing laundry, and his daughter just happened to wander in the next room. Well, the room was completely empty, and like he sees that she's missing, so he goes and looks for her, and she's just standing there staring into a corner, like super intent on one corner of the room. And he asks her, he's like, honey, what are you looking at? And she's like, a baby. Do you see the baby? And he said that his hair just like stood up on the back of his neck, and he's like, And this is how bad it was. It's like he went upstairs, like he took his daughter with him. They went upstairs, got his wife, the mom, and like brought her down there and like, put the girl back in the room, and she went right back to the same corner, said the baby was right there. And they said that it started moving at one point, and she was tracking where it was moving with her eyes and telling them, it's like, oh, the baby's there. The baby's right there.
Oh my God.
And he said eventually she stopped, and just a big smile on her face, and just waddled out of the room, and that was it. But that's the kind of stuff that gives you nightmares as a parent.
That's some straight up GTFO shit right there. Okay, like we can't live here anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, the baby was in the corner, and as we know from Patrick Swayze, you don't put babies there. You
do not put babies in the corner.
Peter Jackson actually shared a story too. He was with Fran Walsh, and they were living in a 100-year-old apartment building at the time. I think this was before Heavenly Creatures came out. And he had slept in. Fran was off preparing coffee for the morning or something. And he gets to looking, and there's a woman standing in the doorway to the room.
Oh, fuck. And no.
Like he's freaking out. He's like, and he said he looked at the woman's face, and her face was caught in a perpetual scream. Like it was frozen as if she was screaming.
Okay, wait, what is that called? What is that called? It's that scary thing. We talked about it in The Ring.
Oh, Death Rictus?
Yes. It was that. No, fuck that. Fuck no. Fuck this.
So she was looking at him like that, not making a sound. She comes toward him. He's freaking out, but he says he's also feeling better about it because, like, in his mind, he thought he was getting robbed by a real life human. So it being a ghost, that was a little bit better to him. And he said that she glided toward him, glided past the bed, and disappeared through a wall. Now, that would have been one thing, but when his wife came in there and saw that he was visibly shaken and pale, she said, "What's wrong? What'd you see?" And he told her. And before he even got through saying anything, she's like, "Wait a minute. Did she have a?" He said he saw a woman. She interrupted him and said, "Did she have a scream on her face, like she was frozen in a scream?" He said, "Yeah. How did you know?" And she's like, "Oh, I've seen her before." And she described, and this would be even worse. She woke up in the middle of the night one time when she was by herself, and the woman was standing at the end of the bed.
Fuck you!
With a scream on her face, looking down at her, and just stared at her.
I hate you. I want to go home. I don't like this at all. I don't like this, and we don't know, but like, fuck, you just would. Oh my God, do you know, poor Noah would be tormented, not by the screaming woman. He'd be tormented by the screaming Latina that'd be like, if you don't get me out of this fucking house, I'm going to burn it down for us.
I heard this story and like my right now my hair's standing on its end. Like that's the reason these movies get to me is because I believe, and like Peter Jackson believes. That's the reason he wanted to make this movie, because he saw that ghost, and so did Fran, and they were like, we believe in them. Let's make a movie about them. You know.
No, I hate them. I hate them. They're so dumb.
Now there's I mean, this has nothing to do with this, but it's a tangent. I'm gonna throw it in here because it's a good time to tell it. Johnny Cash, in an autobiography about him, talks about how his place that he had in the Caribbean was actually haunted, and that it wasn't just him and the family that noticed it. It was actually guests, because it was a regular occurrence. They had the ghost of like a former maid, and she wasn't one that was hot and ready to get down, unfortunately. But she would come into the serving room, and like, you know, and then like everybody would see her, and she had like the old plantation style clothes on, and then she would like, you know, she would move around, and then she would like go back through the wall that she came in on. And like he saw it all the time, his family saw it all the time, and so did the guests that they had there.
Oh my God. Okay, would you stay if that's what you had?
I wouldn't, but I'm one of those people that like, I was surprised at the reaction I had to what could have been a ghost the other day. Because if I'd even thought about it, you know, before then, I would have probably been creeped out by it. But I'm just like, I don't know. But yeah, if it had been in my house, for sure, 100%. We got to get going.
The second you start hearing little feet pitter pattering down the hall or kids laughing, you're gonna GTFO. I just know it.
Listen. I had stuff happen at the last place we lived in. I'm not even joking.
And
with
you GTFO'd.
And well, I'm no longer living there. I'll give you that. But I mean, it was like the scariest one. The one that got me was that in the basements where, you know, I had my game system, I had my, you know,
what are basements? Those aren't real.
So, but anyways, so in the basement, that's where I had my media room, and that's where I, you know, spent a lot of time, you know, was just down there watching movies or whatever. Well, I just got through playing some video games that night with some buddies. It was fairly late. I went, and I was in the, you know, half bath that was off to the, you know, side or whatever. And thankfully I was finished and washing my hands, because I was standing there, and all of a sudden right over my like right shoulder, I hear psst, like, you know, somebody doing that, you know, like behind me.
Yeah.
I jumped and I looked around, and I was, you know, I was kind of smiling, because, you know, my wife was notoriously bad for like sneaking up on me in the basement down there. And like, and I looked, and she was nowhere around.
Oh, hell no.
Hairs on the back of my neck. I simply just walked upstairs. I looked. She was kind of laying there. She looked at me. She's like, well, what's going on? I was like, you went downstairs just a second ago. She's like, no. And I was like, okay. And yeah, it was, I mean, that wasn't the only one, but that happened. And I was just like, okay, there's something in this place. That's great.
Oh my God. No, thank you. No, gracias.
Yeah. So it happens. I mean, you know, people can be skeptical of it and not believe, but if you've ever had it happen to you, it'll change your tune on that.
Yeah.
Big time. Melanie Linsky and Kate Winslet are visible on the cover of the serial killer video that Lucy watches, recreating a famous photo of the real life characters from Heavenly Creatures, which is Peter Jackson's previous film. And by the way, he is a sir, and Fran is a dame, because they have been knighted and whatever, I think, you know, according to whatever the royalty does over in that way. So there you go. Melanie Linsky is actually in the movie. She's the deputy taking Lucy Linsky's statement at the police station, and obviously Lucy's last name is a reference to the actress as well. That's the reason she's named that. Danny Elfman was so impressed with Peter Jackson's previous movie, Heavenly Creatures, that he offered to do the score for one of Jackson's next movies, and agreed to this movie without even knowing what it was about.
Wow.
And Heavenly Creatures opened up a lot of doors for Peter Jackson, because it wasn't just Elfman that got on board with him. It was actually Chi McBride, who played Cyrus, only agreed to be in the movie because he originally turned it down. They had him in there. He rehearsed as Cyrus. He didn't like the fact that his character really wasn't in the movie that much and didn't have any lines. And that's something, what happened with that is that that Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh admitted that they were not very good at writing, like comedic dialogue, especially considering, they were writing it for an American audience, and they were, they're Kiwis, so like the humor wouldn't have came across the same way. And so what their intent was that they would hire very funny improv comedians and have them basically come up with their own lines, and then like just, whatever was the funniest, they would keep in the movie. That way it was kind of a shorthand way of them not having to try to create dialogue that they were not very good at.
Yeah.
And so Chai didn't know this. He saw the initial thing and he said, I'm not in it and the lines are not that good, so I'm out. Well, he watched Heavenly Creatures and he saw how good of a movie it was. And he was like, damn, I probably need to be in this movie if I can, because this guy can legit direct a movie. And Peter Jackson hadn't found anybody else at the time. So he calls him back up and he's like, listen, we didn't tell you this the first time. We meant to. It got slipped by. We want you to help us create the character Cyrus. And when he heard that, and he already was pumped up by seeing Heavenly Creatures anyways, he's like, fine, I'm in your movie, let's do this. So he wouldn't have got in it if it hadn't been for Heavenly Creatures. Michael J. Fox was actually, he was on the fence, and if he hadn't saw Heavenly Creatures, he wouldn't have done the movie, but he happened to see it in Toronto, and he agreed to do it. So that's something else that kind of, so Heavenly Creatures just was the big time movie that like got Jackson where he needed to be at.
Which is funny. I've never seen it. I've never seen it, and I have never heard of it.
I've never seen it either, but it's basically based on real life, like true crime is what it is. Like it's supposed to be very well acted and very well done. Like, I mean, these two sisters basically end up, I think, killing their parents or something like that. And it was like a crime that was big in like that area of the world, New Zealand, Australia, I think it was New Zealand, and like it, got pretty famous, and that's what the movie's about. When Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson were writing part of the drill sergeant in the graveyard, they wrote the part as a spoof of R. Lee Ermey. They actually wrote it as a spoof of his character from Full Metal Jacket, with the intention of getting an actor from New Zealand for the role, but they didn't feel any of the actors who auditioned were right, and they just said, hey, we want it to be like R. Lee Ermey, so let's just get R. Lee Ermey. So that's how he got in it. The shooting script originally included another character in the cemetery called the Gatekeeper. It was a big chubby angel who would be acting as the cemetery's guardian. Now, they've got images of this in the deleted scenes, and it is the goofiest looking character ever. And there's a reason that Peter Jackson cut it first, because when he looked at the final runtime, he's like, I got to cut something. He's like, what's the first thing I can cut? And even though they spent all this time on prosthetics, they had this big fat baby or whatever that was naked, basically. I mean, you could see it's like, junk down there.
Oh my God.
And they had these, and you had these little cherub wings. It stood like twice as tall as Michael J. Fox, by the way. That's how big it was, and about 4 times as wide. It was, and so anyways, it was supposed to be the R. Lee Ermey was like the initial, lookout for the cemetery, and this was his enforcer. It's like big bad, basically, to help, keep bad stuff out of the cemetery. And anyways, whenever he got if you look at it, it doesn't fit with any other ghost designs, because they're all like people, and like this thing's this big puppet, like, mascot thing. And so when he was getting a look, he's like, well, that creature doesn't look like the rest of them. So to make the movie consistent visually, let's just cut that out of the movie. And I think it was probably pretty good, because R. Lee Ermey was enough, in my opinion, as the gatekeeper of the cemetery. And this thing looks really weird. Like, if you've ever seen this movie Dead Alive, there's a scene at the end of the movie where, because the character's whole thing in that movie is the fact that he's a mama's boy, and like he's just spent, and his mom's like this big monstrous like zombie at the end of the movie, and she actually shoves him back up in her vagina, and like back into the womb at the end of the movie, and like he has to like bust his way out, and it's like supposed to be symbolizing that he's finally out from under his mother's thumb or whatever. But anyways, like, she's this big monstrous looking thing, and like this creature looked like it should have fit in Dead Alive, if you've ever seen that. It's really weird looking. He also made a weird movie called Meet the Fleeples, which was like a Sesame Street if the characters fucked and they killed each other. So
wait, what was it called?
It would have fit Meet the Fleeples or something like that, or the Feebles or something.
Yeah, I think Noah and I have seen that.
Yeah, it's really weird, but this creature looks like it would have fit that too. It's just a weird looking thing. Joe Mantegna actually auditioned for the role of Milton Dammers, but they had Jeffrey Combs in mind because he had worked on Reanimator, and they loved that movie so much that they asked their casting director Victoria Burrows to find out whether he was still available and working, and whenever they found that he was, they signed him up. And so Jeffrey Combs came up with all the looks for his character. He was the one that suggested, whenever he started researching the character, that he have like an Adolf Hitler type haircut. And he said that his reasoning for that was the fact that Milton Dammers was so, like, he had endured so much for his country that he was very like patriotic. So he kind of felt like that nationalistic, like I'll do anything for my country type character, kind of like symbolized how Hitler was in a way. And that's kind of what influenced him. He actually went to Weta, Peter Jackson's effects company, and told him he wanted appliances put behind Dammers' ears to make them like stand out more, make them, like really pop out from his head, so he looked goofier, that way too. And he was the one that decided the several of Dammers' chest tattoos, because they asked him, they's like, which ones do you think he would have? And he was the one that picked out all those ones that were on his, or most of the ones on his chest.
They look like scrapes, or not scrapes, but they look like carvings more than anything.
Yeah, well, that's what they are, but they're, they were carved in more of a scar than they are a tattoo. But he was the one that picked them, and he was also the one that came up with the idea that he would have like the swastikas on his palms or whatever, which that's in the director's cut. I don't think that's in the regular movie.
Oh, okay, yes, and I did see that.
And he was the one, and he also wore black contact lenses because he's got like kind of like I think they're pale green, or he's got like greenish brown eyes or something, and he wanted Dammers to have like these dark, like darker eyes, kind of like he's demonic or something. So they made him like black contact lenses for the role. Also, because he couldn't see, and that's probably the best, because without his glasses, he literally couldn't see what he was doing when he was doing the rehearsal.
Oh, okay.
For Dammers. Now this is interesting. This was originally planned as a Tales from the Crypt movie. But executive producer Robert Zemeckis, who, was the one that helped make Back to the Future, decided it should stand on its own and not be part of the series. He liked the script so much. He's like, we've got some other movies in the, Tales from the Crypt series. I think this should be its own thing.
I don't see this being scary enough to be a Tales from the Crypt scene,
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent, but how scary was Bordello of Blood when you get right down to it?
True. Okay.
I mean, if you think about along the lines of it, now it was not on the same par as Demon Knight, but I mean, but if you watch the movie, it actually does have like Tales from the Crypt, like the way the camera moves and stuff like that. It's got like a comic book vibe to it.
Yeah.
And also Robert Zemeckis is the main reason that Michael J. Fox was even on the roster, because he knew whenever they came to him, they suggested, Peter Jackson and Fran did, they's like, we would like Michael J. Fox to do this part, and he said, well, since he had such a close working relationship with him from Back to the Future, he's like, let me talk to Michael, and he said, I'll get him to consider it. And like I said, Michael was still on the fence if it hadn't been for Heavenly Creatures, but he saw that and he's like, okay, he's like, I like what he's doing. And whenever he actually met Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, he actually like stayed with them at their house. Like that's where they kept him up at their big, they had a huge house at that point because Heavenly Creatures pulled in so much money. And he actually took care of their son, Billy Jackson, who is actually in the movie. He's that little kid that Cyrus and Stewart are talking to, and they get him to smile and agree to being with them on the haunting of the rich lady at that point in the movie. That's actually Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh's son in the movie.
Oh my God.
Peter Jackson and Robert Zemeckis unsuccessfully campaigned to have the film released in October for Halloween week. The studio wanted it for a summer release, and which backfired, as we said, and they didn't do so well in the gross earnings. The film was originally meant to be, this is terrible. The movie was meant to be PG-13, but the MPAA thought the movie was too intense for the rating and gave it an R. And no matter how much Peter Jackson edited the movie to try to get it down to PG-13, they would not let him have it. They kept saying, nope, it's an R. You'll never get anything less. So And some of the reasons for it was stupid shit, like the door getting shot by Patty's gun, just seeing the bullets, or the way the bullets penetrate the door.
Yeah.
That somehow made it an R rating.
Yeah, that's
and they were
stupid.
And Jackson, being angry that he had to tone himself down for nothing. It was too late in the movie for him to go back and add in more gruesome stuff for the rest of the movie. He was already at the point where it was like where Dammers was getting killed, but he's like, fuck it. If I can't get a PG-13, then we're going to hard into this R. And that's the reason that Dammers' death scene in the movie is more graphic, where he gets his total head blown off, is because originally they were just going to have him take a shot to the chest and then to get the rating down. And since he never got the PG-13, he's like, nope, his head's getting blown off. And then he's like, I wished I could have added in more shit to the beginning of the movie to kind of make it more gruesome in that sense.
Yeah, if it was already going to get the R rating.
Yeah. And the TV cut apparently features the original death scene where he just gets shot in the chest, but still it's not considered a PG-13. And Danny Elfman even argues for this, because they have him on there, and he said it's the dumbest thing. He said that he took his 11-year-old daughter at the time to watch the movie, and she absolutely loved it. And he said that she asked him beforehand, is there anything that you have to worry about? And he said he'd only seen preliminary viewings, like the preliminary shots. He didn't see the whole thing before he went. So he told her, he's like, I don't remember there being anything that's a problem. And so he took her, and she loved it. And they both, when they walked out of the theater, was like, why was that? He and his 11-year-old daughter was asking why that was considered, such a big thing.
I don't get it.
I don't either, but that the censor board gets hung up on stupid shit all the time, so I don't know what to say. From the half point of the film onwards, Lucy wears only one outfit, the pink shirt that she's wearing, like the sweater. It eventually became a running joke throughout the film, such that on the last day of the schedule, the crew presented her with a Barbie doll that looked just like her, and it had the pink sweater on. And there was a scene, she surprised Peter Jackson, because there was a scene at the end of the movie where he was filming her, and he cut in, and he's like, Lucy, start your line. And she stepped away out of the view of the camera, held up her Barbie doll, and was just moving it around. It's like, hello.
Oh my God.
I'm Lucy Linsky. I'm doing, and he said he was dying laughing. He's like, at least she was in on the joke.
Yeah.
Trini Alvarado, and this is bad. Trini Alvarado, who played Lucy, sustained so many bruises working on the film, receiving new ones almost every day, that the makeup department would take pictures for future reference. The scene where she's running from Dee Wallace, she is supposed to have removed the key from the door and flee as the door slams behind her. However, on the day that the take that they ultimately had in the movie, she was a little too slow, and her hand was almost crushed as the door slammed together. And they mention this too, and they show it, and they showed both sides of it. She barely gets her hand through the door before it slams on it, and she's sitting there, and then she shoves the key in there real quick and finishes it up. You can tell that she's kind of a little bit shaky, which is good from the scene, because she's supposed to be running from D. But then they focus in on her, and they ask her, are you all right? And she's like, thankfully, she's out of breath because she realizes what was about to happen.
Yeah.
They also show the reason that she's so bruised up is because and this is, more power to her. She's a real trooper. Every time that Dammers or somebody had to throw her in the movie, she told them, she said, nope, throw me harder. She's like, I can take it. And there's a little scene in the movie of Jeffrey Combs, that scene in the hospital where he slams her up against this wall or whatever. And they do it 3 different times. And each time he hits her harder against it. And I'm just like, Jesus. She was for it. She was a trooper. She just went with it.
She's one of those.
Weta Digital, Sir Peter Jackson's visual effects company, had to extend their capacity from 1 to 35 computers in order to meet the visual effects demands for this movie. Jackson used it as an excuse to direct a fantasy movie afterwards and chose Lord of the Rings as his next film. Literally, he was sitting there and he was like, well, I've got 35 computers. What am I going to do with them? He's like, I got to do something big. And he's like, let's go totally fantastical. And then he was literally I got to give the guy credit for his thinking. It's the one movie or book series everybody said was unfilmable. And he just sat there and said, no, fuck it. We're doing the Lord of the Rings. That's
hold my beer.
Hold the beer. He states that the Frighteners provided a good bridge between his independent film Heavenly Creatures and Lord of the Rings, because it was like him working with computers and getting used to the bigger budget and effects. You know how much information those computers held, all 35 of them?
As much as a cell phone does now.
1.6 terabytes.
Oh,
that's it.
Oh my, 35 fucking computers.
1.6 and they talk on there about how much room that was. I'm like, geez. I was like, okay, that's how things have changed.
35 computers though. Like, how do you work? Was an individual person working on them at any given time, or what?
Oh, the film crew or the effects crew that Weta was working on this, they worked themselves to death because here's the thing: when Universal told them that they had a summer release, that was in the spring. They didn't have the movie done, so they had to turn and say, "Fuck, we've got to do everything in like a month's time."
Oh my god!
So they had to crunch. Like they said, those guys were working almost 24 hours a day to get that movie done.
Damn.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give them credit. They even had they were showing it. They even had like a program set up on their computers that they designed themselves. They called it Spook Set, and it was like a special like setting that they could take like the footage of the actors, because they filmed on blue screen instead of green screen for this movie. They took the ghost actors next on their blue screen, and they they had like a setting on the computer that automatically adjusted the transparency and the color effects of the ghost so that they matched the scene better. Like it was just like a little drop down bar. They just had to adjust it because they had to do it so many times. They made their own program up.
Fuck, dude.
He showed how they did the scene though, where they made like Michael J. Fox and some of the other ghosts like fall through floors and stuff like that. Now that was a painstaking mess. They had to sit there and take every frame of the scene with Michael J. Fox in it, and like highlight where his legs were at or whatever part was supposed to be disappearing through the floor, and they had to individually remove it, and they had to do that for every single second that he was moving in the scene.
No, thank you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, even if the effects are dated, these guys worked their ass off. So there's no,
Well, they had to work with what they had for at the time, which was pretty much nothing, because it sounds like they created what they had.
Oh, their computer, that program they had, Spook Set, looked like an old DOS program. Like if you booted up DOS, and like it was, had the old Windows, like, the colors were even like, the old computers, like you could, real fuzzy looking, and like, it really dated stuff.
Oh my God.
I was going to say too, just what they had to work with. I mean, when they were talking about like they had adjust the colors for the ghost, like anytime the ghost was in a scene with like any kind of different lighting, it would have changed the color of the ghost. So that's why they had to go in there and adjust it all the time to keep that consistent, like light blue, whitish look to them or whatever. Because if they were in a scene that's something that had a lot of green in it or something, they would look green. So they had to go in there and adjust all that stuff.
It sounds like bullshit.
It looked like bullshit, to be honest with you, but they pulled it off. And it gave them a lot of, and honestly, it gave them the experience they needed to make the Lord of the Rings. We would not have the Lord of the Rings without this movie at all.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my God, what a drastic difference in CGI, though, from this to Lord of the Rings.
Well, that's true. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, let's bring this up because this is the news. So Peter Jackson was consulted by the idiots who made the Lord of the Rings, The Power of the Rings for Amazon. They came to him originally and they said, would you like to produce this? Because, obviously you made The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and we wouldn't be here without you. And he was like, sure, send me the scripts. And they left him on read. They ghosted his ass. As soon as they got him to say, okay, let me look at them, that was the one thing they needed so that they go out to the audience, because Tolkien fans are pissed right now with this series, by the way. That was one thing they could go out there and say, look, your Lord and Savior, Peter Jackson, said that he would consult on this. And then he came out and said recently, it's big in the news, he said, yeah, I said I would, and then you ghosted me. So,
yeah. Sons of bitches.
So, talk about a woke piece of shit. The new Lord of the Rings looks like that's exactly what it is. And I love the Peter Jackson movies. It's probably, it is my favorite trilogy. It really is. I could go back and watch them anytime. The only problem is the time commitment, because if you what's the extended versions. I mean, you're talking about what, like a 12, 13-hour movie or something, all said and done. That's a lot of time. And just like, Star Wars and just like the Marvel movies and all that, they're steadily ruining that franchise too, or at least they're trying to. But the Tolkien fans are just saying, no, you're not going to ruin our franchise.
We're putting our foot down.
Movies.
We're putting our hairy elf feet down.
Hobbit feet. Hairy Hobbit feet. As an inside joke, the black and white footage of Johnny Bartlett's trial contains many cameos of the crew members in the picture. And they actually said that the reason that looks the way it does, and I thought this was cool, it was just a simple film trick, was that they took the actual raw footage that they filmed, and instead of cleaning it up, they was like, nope, let's just use the footage that we got, and that's why it looks all grainy and, like it looks like it's old-timey footage because it just wasn't processed through anything.
Wow.
It's a simple trick, but it worked. I mean, no other actor besides Michael J. Fox was considered for the role of Frank. Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh were having a meeting with Robert Zemeckis about the film, and when his name came up, Jackson liked the idea and sent the script to Fox. However, just because he was the only one they considered doesn't mean that other people didn't try for the part. Tom Cruise, Matthew Broderick, Johnny Depp, John Cusack, and Danny fucking DeVito were all considered for the part if Michael J. Fox had turned it down, if he had.
What the fuck how did they even know?
Well, they were in contention. I don't think they actually tried for it, but those were the ones they were going to go to. Now, can you imagine any of those actors? I mean, it's just like we said before, but Danny DeVito that would have been a totally different version of Frank Bannister. Like,
Tom Cruise would have been completely different. Matthew Broderick, maybe, because they were kind of one and the same around this time era.
Comedic sensibility, yeah.
Yeah, Johnny Depp is a no. It would have been too sexy.
Tim Burton on this.
Yeah, because I mean that at this particular time he wasn't as creepy, Johnny Depp, yet. He was,
but he was Edward Scissorhands Johnny Depp at that time.
Was he? That was 1996 era?
I think that was 94 or something.
Oh my God. Okay, never mind. But yeah, okay. Now it makes sense. I was thinking younger Johnny Depp. I was thinking he was still teen heartthrob Johnny Depp.
Edward Scissorhands was in 1990, so.
Okay, you know what? Fuck off.
We're old, okay? We know this.
1990, that was like what? Like 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was like 4 years ago. I mean, but yeah, I don't know. I read these actors and I'm like, Danny DeVito, like he does, like it's like that old Sesame Street thing. One of these things is not like the other one.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, Michael J. Fox is said to have turned down starring in The Island of Dr. Moreau, the 1996 version, as Edward Douglas to make this film, which is probably a good thing because I hear that movie was a shit show. So
I did too. They made it seem so interesting in the fucking reviews. And there's a podcast I was listening to. Oh my God, that briefly discussed on it, and apparently that movie was a shit show.
That was the one that had Val Kilmer in it, right?
Yes.
If I remember right. Okay.
I want to say he plays Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, I mean, this movie didn't get out there, but it's a cult favorite now, and I don't think The Island Dr. Moreau ever got that status. So at least he has that to his name.
Yeah.
Dee Wallace stars in this movie with Michael J. Fox. At the time of filming, she was married to Christopher Stone, who played a character named Michael Fox in the 1980 movie The Junkman. So that's kind of weird. In order to trick audiences into believing that Patricia Bradley was innocent of the Fairwater murders, Peter Jackson specifically wanted Dee Wallace for the part because everyone knew her at that time as the Elliot's mother in E.T.
Yeah, gave her that softer image.
No one, and the funny thing is, this probably was the stepping stone for her to be in Rob Zombie's movies, because he looked at this and said, "Hell yeah, you're going to be in, Three from Hell and everything else that I do because you got that craziness I want."
You mine now, bitch.
You mine now. When Frank's ghost friends attack the Linsky residence, a mini statue of Elvis Presley floats in front of Ray. Peter Dobson, who played Ray, played Elvis in the Forrest Gump movie. I didn't know this till I read this trivia the other day. So when you see Lucy's husband, you're seeing Elvis from, the from Forrest Gump. And I just remember that part, because Tom Hanks is talking about how he's grinding his hips or whatever.
Oh my God. No, he did not. Oh my God. I could see it now, but that's hella funny.
And Peter Jackson said in the special features that Ray Dobson or Peter Dobson was in on it. He said that he loved it. He said that he caught the reference immediately. He's like, yeah, that's cool. Because he was a big fan of Elvis anyways. That's why he was in the original. He was in Forrest Gump because he was such a big fan of Elvis. He kind of like mimicked him all the time. Now, this is funny. Sirius's line, "Nice shooting," text during the museum scene was one of Peter Venkman's lines from Ghostbusters. So,
yeah,
Ghostbusters reference. Originally, the judge did not vanish from the film after the museum scene. More scenes were shot of the character after he is cut in half, including him crawling around on his hands in the museum. Frank meeting him during the cemetery battle in which he would help Frank fight the Reaper, after which he remarks, "Gotta hand it to you, Frank. You've defeated death itself." And then appearance at the end where he and Rustler the dog say goodbye to Frank and head out west. And actually in that scene, they show it in the special features. He's on the back of Rustler the dog, riding him like he's a pony, his upper half. And then like his legs are walking off to the east because he said that his legs and his upper half have come to an understanding. They're just not cool with each other anymore.
Oh my
That's what
God.
the line was or something. These scenes were cut due to pacing reasons and were not added back in for the director's cut due to insufficient funds to properly finish the effects, but can be viewed on deleted scenes, which that's where I saw them at. Rough. It's kind of a funny scene, but you're not missing much by having. I think it's actually a better thing for the judge that he dies the way he does. I mean, it gives more sympathy for the character. He's more the hero, the way he goes out. Roughly 21 minutes into the film, Frank Bannister is eating by the window. If you look closely, he's eating one of the General Mills famed monster cereals. And of course, it's Blueberry cereal is what he's eating.
Yes, I saw that. I freaked out because, as you know, Reverend, last Halloween season, if you will, they did bring out the original boxes, which you and I believe we got all 3 of them.
Yes.
They are out again.
I've seen pictures that Fruit Brut's out this year, just so you know.
You know what? I don't know. I did see the original, well, not the original, but the main 3, if you will, are already on sale at Sam's Club as a 3-pack.
I'm really tempted, but the problem is my current sugar dilemma. I don't know that I should be eating that anymore, but God, I love that cereal so much.
Oh my God. It is definitely a Halloween staple, something that, I don't know, we get at least 1 box,
That was my problem in the past. I usually eat like 2 or 3 of them before Halloween season was over with. I mean,
for shame.
It's a pretty nice little treat to come home to. Michael J. Fox's character speaks on a cordless phone through a mouthful of food twice, which is funny. And he also does this. He looks at his watch during one of the times right after he's talking through it, which is exactly what he does in Back to the Future. Like, it's the exact same thing that he does, because he's sitting there, because Doc calls him up and he's like, "Where you at, Martin?" He's like, he's eating, and he's like, "I'll be right there." He's talking through a mouthful of food, and he looks at his watch real quick. He does in this movie, and I know it's deliberate. It was a callback.
And I'm wondering if he brought that to the film, or if that's something that he was directed to do.
I think it was both, because I'll get to that in a second. But he also ended both of them with like the phrase, "I'm on my way," which is the exact same thing he said in both movies. The reason I say that I think that he brought it to it was because they've got scenes of this. He's in the car, and he's supposed to be talking to the judge, but every time that he talks to him, he ends his line in Doc, because he said he didn't know what was wrong with his mind, but he kept conflating the judge with Doc Brown, and he kept doing it. Like, there's scenes of him. He's like, "Why are you doing this, Doc?" And then he was like, "Shit," like he would say it after, because he knew what he said.
Yeah.
I think that's hilarious.
Good God.
So I think he did bring Back to the Future with him into this. Like, I think they wrote it in, but I think he brought it in with him.
It was unintentional, but then it became intentional. So,
yeah. there was a scene in two different scenes. He runs over a white fence. That is a staple for him as a actor, because he crashed through a white fence in the Volvo in this. In Back to the Future, he crashes through a white fence in the DeLorean, and in Doc Hollywood, he crashes through a white fence in the Porsche. So apparently, that's a running gag for him in some of these movies.
What the hell?
I don't know. He just don't like white fences, I
Yeah,
guess.
and for what reason? Yeah, I'm like, and for what reason? Like, other than this happened before on this film.
I don't know. It's just weird. He performed many of his own stunts in the film. And this is true. Like there's a scene in the movie where he's like there's a car that's supposed to be moving that stops right in front of him, and he kind of like jumps on the hood and slides across. He did those scenes, like he wanted to do the scenes as long as they wasn't too dramatic, because he got used to doing a lot of stunts on Back to the Future. But the weird part is he broke his foot while filming the forest scene, and it wasn't a stunt at all. It just happened to be that it was dark. He didn't know where he was putting his foot. He made a misstep, put it in a hole, and he twisted his ankle and broke his foot instantly.
Ow.
So he did all of these stunts, and he ends up breaking his foot by just doing that. Peter Jackson said his injury was actually a blessing in disguise because it allowed him to work on the script some more, which it was. Like, they need to work on their script. So like he basically said, okay, you need a few weeks away, and so we'll give you a break, and then they'll give us time to write some more. And then they edited some of the film scenes. But the scene where Lucy and Ray and Frank are all at the dinner table, and he's doing that whole thing from Ghost. Actually, his foot was really badly hurt then, and that was right before he actually went to the hospital and got it fixed completely before they took a break. And they said he was in that the reason they filmed that scene was because he could sit down during the entire thing, and they said he was in intense pain the entire time he was filming that scene.
Ow.
So that shows how much of an actor he is, because you can't really tell that he's suffering that much during that scene.
Yeah, fucking weird.
It was during filming this on location in New Zealand that Michael J. Fox made up his mind that he'd had enough of being away from his family and making movies, and decided to head back to the small screen and star in Spin City. This turned out to be his last leading role in a film. He literally was just so far away from his family for so long. He's like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame him. I mean, and it's crazy that working on Spin City was almost like a semi-retirement for him.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy, which... one thing I'll give them on Spin City, they actually had Christopher Lloyd on there, and it was basically, I mean, they played into the joke of him, and Doc Brown being together again. I thought that I had to give them credit for that, because I remember that episode.
Yeah, it was on for 6 years, Spin City.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and he only gave it up, I think, because the Parkinson's started getting so severe that he couldn't keep it from being in the character.
I was wondering when that kind of started taking over.
It wasn't in this. I mean, you can see scenes from this, and if there was any there, it's barely noticeable. I mean, he is a little spastic with his movements, but he always kind of was. So it's like, but I mean, you can really see it in Spin City toward the end, because he even started getting that look that he's got now, where he's kind of like, it's unfortunate, but like they get that problem where their face doesn't is not as animated or moves as much as it used to. It's kind of got that like frozen look to it. He started getting that toward the end of the TV show.
I did not realize that Michael J. Fox is only 5'4".
Yeah, he's very short.
He is like, super short. Oh my God. Like he is, I used to be 5'4", but then I had kids, got fat. I don't know. The gravity has pulled me down a little bit, so I'm only at 5'3" on a good day. So
I was 5'4" back as a freshman.
Shut up. No one's talking. This does not involve you.
At one point, Tim Burton and Sam Raimi were in contention to direct this.
Wow. I mean, Tim Burton 100% could see that.
Tim Burton I could see, but Sam Raimi I could see more, because some of the camera, the way that Peter Jackson does the camera in this, I could see Sam Raimi doing something similar. The real quick zoom ins, and the way that he kind of cants it at weird levels and all that stuff. It reminded me of Sam Raimi when I was watching it a little bit. I was kind of surprised when I read this. I was like, well, I could see that.
If Sam Raimi had directed this, the rated R would have made sense.
Well, it would have made sense. You would have seen Ted Raimi in it, and of course Bruce Campbell would have been in it at one point.
Yeah.
If not, Bruce Campbell would have probably been Frank Bannister. Let's be honest.
Probably, yeah.
And Johnny Depp would have definitely been Frank Bannister if Tim Burton had directed.
Oh, 100%. You cannot not have Victor in the film. And I say that for as many times as Johnny Depp has played Victor.
I wonder if Winona Ryder would have been Lucy in this if he would have directed this.
She was pale and she was brunette, so maybe.
And she has, she does see ghosts. Sure she has in the past because she is strange and unusual, as we know.
Oh, shut up.
One of the two horror movies released in '96 to use Don't Fear the Reaper as the cover. What other movie was that you would imagine would have Don't Fear the Reaper in it? Scream.
Okay. What? Oh, no, it was Sweet Dreams by Marilyn Manson. I don't know why I was thinking Don't Fear the Reaper, but okay.
Yeah, and they both feature a serial killer disguised as a hooded ghost figure, so there you go.
Ooh.
This was the last time a film directed by Peter Jackson was rated R by the MPAA until the extended cut of The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, was released 18 years later. So he actually did get them to give him PG-13 ratings on, The Lord of the Rings and most of the Hobbit films. So he figured it out. We've already said that Billy Jackson was in the movie as the cute little kid that's smiling in it. Grant Major, the production designer, is Chuck Hughes' obituary photo earlier in the movie. So Grant Major appears in it. Peter Jackson's in the movie. I don't know if you caught his scene, but it's like when Frank bumps into the punk rocker biker guy or whatever with the rings in his nose. And it's funny because he said that those piercings that he had were made out of just plain pieces of metal that they'd bent to pop in there. And he ended up wearing them most of the day, and he said they were very uncomfortable to wear for that long.
Yeah, they had, even the costume ones that you could buy were not very comfortable.
Yeah, but these were actually made out of metal that some like Ouija people just bent together and said, here you go.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
During Ray Linsky's funeral, you can see Frank Bannister's house burning down in the background, not clearly, but you can see the large orange blur directly behind Lucy, and that was because the film crew had finished filming there, so they just burnt the thing down because they built it and it was a piece of shit anyway, so they just burnt the rest of it down.
Oh my
god. Anything else you want to say about this movie before we get on to the more somber discussion of the evening to round us out here?
No, I think you covered I've never seen so many fucking trivia points in a movie. You covered a lot, and I think we were able to get our piece in.